In this video, I want to talk about a question I get asked quite often, and it also came up in my most recent live. So I thought I'd make a video on it. And that is, how do you house hack if you're a family of three or more? Now, if you're asking yourself, Samuel, what qualifies you to answer this question? Well, first and foremost, I'm happily married. And additionally, on top of that, I currently, as the time of this recording, have six children. Okay. And in ages, for those of you who are interested, in ages from as old as 12 years old to as young as 1 years old presently. All right. Now, at the time I had to answer this question, I didn't have six children. At the time I had to answer this question, I had two children. The first time I had to answer this question. And then the second time I had to answer this question, I had four children. But this is consistently a question that's on my mind now because I've been coaching for close to a decade, and often I have clients who ask the same question. So the question again, for those of you who want to pick up your pen, is, Samuel, how do you house hack? And I will define house hacking in this video, even though I've defined it on some of my previous videos, if you are a family of three or more, okay? Now, house hacking is very simply, as a definition, the process of leveraging your current place of residence in order for you to position yourself to be able to pay in order for you to be able to live for free or to pay a lot less for your current living accommodation. So let me give you a very simple example so you understand what I'm talking about, and I'll give you an example that works for a single person and or a couple, and then I'll circle back into how we actually do this if you're a family of three or more. Now, let's say like one of my students who did this years ago, this was back in 2014, 2015. Let's say you're ready to buy a house and you're thinking, okay, I want to buy a one-bedroom apartment. Let's say you work like I spent most of my working career in London and around areas of London like Canary Wharf, where property prices are fairly, as some people would call it, expensive. Now, what I advised this particular person all these years ago is, rather than her buying her first flat as a one-bedroom flat in the Tower Hamlets area where Canary Wharf is, I instead said to her what she should do is she should look at potentially going to buy a 3 or 4 bedroom house out in the Midlands, okay? And she decided to agree. She was a very good student, even though she was a teacher who worked in a school that I worked in at the same time. And I also said to her that she should leverage her career path as well. So what I said to her about her career path, I said, look, typically across the UK, if you're a teacher who's worked in inner London, inner city London schools, you are seen as kind of gold dust in those exterior communities out there in the Midlands, out there up north, etc., and these other locations. So I said to her, if you apply for a job out in the Midlands, somewhere like Walsall, somewhere like Birmingham, somewhere like, just those kind of the Black Country, those kind of regions, what she'd be able to do is she'd be able to leverage her experience as someone who's been working inside of an inner city London school and hopefully also get a promotion. And because of the banding of salaries, and if you don't know what that is, that's basically the fact that teachers in the UK cannot get paid less than a certain amount of a salary, especially if they're in certain subjects. And she, like me, was in the subject of maths. She was an early stage teacher. But I basically said to her, look, you're in your first year of teaching. You've literally just got qualified. You might be on something like 27, 29,000 right now. If you go up north or if you go to the Midlands, they can't pay you less than 24. So if you do take a pay cut, you're only taking a £3,000 pay cut. But if you're able to secure a responsibility or a role with a promotion, then what might happen is you might end up on actually more money than you're currently on, and obviously with all these other benefits. So I basically spelled this out to her. Now, this was a sister, for those of you who know what I mean. So as a result, she looked up to me as an older brother in the school teaching profession, and also she knew that I was interested and active in property. So she was basically just like picking my brain in terms of, Samuel, what do I do with this way? What do I do in this regard and that regard? And I basically put her onto leveraging property in order to guide her career rather than using her career to guide her wealth creation journey. Okay, so this is why I call her a great student, even though she was a teacher. Now you get it. So basically, I advised this student slash teacher to go and make these moves, and this is exactly what she did. She ended up moving to the Midlands. She ended up getting a new job. The job gave her a promotion, so she ended up getting paid more than she was getting paid in London. And she also ended up buying a 4-bedroom house. And this 4-bedroom house, I then told her, rent all of the rooms out to other teachers in other schools in your local area. And what you will have is all of these people, these teachers who are renting from you, paying your mortgage every month. And she went and did that, and I fast forward spoke to her about a year or two after she had done that, and she was literally so excited, so happy that she had made that move. And what I want to share, which I think is super important here, is making one right move can radically change your life. Like, making one right move can radically change your life. A number of years ago, let me share this cap with you, because a number of years ago, this used to be my biggest mantra when I used to first start teaching people about how to leverage and use property. And it's the concept of you are only one seller away. Okay. And this is my one seller away cap. And I used to give away t-shirts and lots of other paraphernalia showing people the belief that I had that you're one seller away. Now, how did I get this belief? I got this belief because one property I bought in 2017, the moment I signed the contract to secure that property, I was able to lock in £100,000 added to my net worth, because the house was valued at 240,000 and I was able to buy it at 136,000, which is a gap of over £100,000. I added £100,000 to my net worth simply by buying a property. So this is why one of my strongest beliefs about property is you are only one seller away. So I shared with this young lady what she should do. She did it, and she was literally living the dream because of one move. So one move can change your life, right? So if one move can change your life and you're a family of 3 and you're saying to yourself, well, Samuel, you've shared with me this concept of how to house hack so that I can live for free. And I've heard this idea of, okay, I can move into an apartment. Instead of buying a 1-bedroom apartment, I can buy a 4-bedroom apartment or buy a 4-bedroom house in a whole nother area and leverage that, rent it out. And then that way I don't have to pay my monthly expenses. I have tenants or residents paying my monthly expenses, and I get to keep all of the 1,500 or whatever it would have been that I was supposed to pay every month in a mortgage. Okay. But then the question comes up, which I heard on the live earlier on. And also people ask me often, Samuel, what if I'm not a single person? And what if it's not just me and my partner, i.e. we just live in one of the rooms and rent out the other 3 rooms? What if I'm a family of 3? What if I've got a child or children? Okay. Now, the underlying premise and principle, the core pattern I'm going to share with you in order to get this moving, house hacking to live for free with a family of 3 or more, is to think outside of the box. That's the underlying principle. Okay. Now I'm going to go through maybe 2 examples, depending on the amount of time we have. I'm going to go through a couple of examples, but I want you to understand that the principle we're using here is thinking outside the box. That's the key principle we're using. Now, let's go into our first example of how you can house hack as a family of 3 or more. The first way you can house hack as a family of 3 or more is by leveraging mixed use property. Okay, by leveraging mixed use property. Samuel, what do you mean mixed use property? Here's a perfect example. A mixed use property in the UK is exactly the same in the US of A, but they just use it, they call it a slightly different name. But a mixed use property is a property that has a commercial element. Commercial means a business element, as well as a residential element. Residential basically means for residing as a human being. Okay. Now, if you're a family of 3 or more, instead of going to buy a house or instead of going to buy an apartment, you could buy a mixed use building. Now, if you buy a mixed use building, a fully functional mixed use building, one that's up and running and has the kind of decor that you're interested in, or at least close to, so you don't spend too much on your refurbishment, you can rent out the lower part of the building, the commercial part, to a business. And what will happen is that business will pay you every single God blessed month in rent to have the privilege of using that commercial space whilst you live upstairs inside of the residential part. Now, that might be a flat, that might be an upstairs flat, that might be a maisonette, okay, which is basically a flat which is on 2 or more floors, okay? So basically you might have a house on top of a shop, okay, kind of thing. That's called a maisonette. It could be any kind of form, function, or framework. But the essence is we're thinking outside of the box. We're realizing, well, hold on a minute. We want to have the ability to live for free, but we don't want to be in a position where necessarily we're renting out the rooms in our immediate space. And the reason we don't want to rent out the rooms in our immediate space, because you may be a family of 3. You may have a little one or little ones, and you may not want the integration or interaction between a stranger and your children to alleviate danger. Okay, so if that's your thought process and your thinking, you can go and purchase a commercial, or more importantly, a mixed use property, which has a commercial element and a residential element. Now, why might you want to do this? One of the reasons you might want to do this is because depending on the location and the area, that commercial element can generate more income than you may have to pay on your mortgage in total. And if it can't, then it can definitely have a dent in the amount that you are going to be investing on a monthly basis to acquire that property. So that's one of the things you could do. You can literally go for a mixed use unit. Now, one of the things to bear in mind, if you are thinking, you know what, Samuel, that's the answer, I'm going to go and do that right now. If you are going to purchase a mixed use property, typically, this is not always the case, but this is a typical way you should think of it. Typically, a commercial or mixed use property is going to expect a 35% deposit rather than a standard buy to let property, which would typically require a 25% deposit. That's just one thing to think about. And obviously that is 3.5 times more. Well, actually not 3.5 times more. It is about seven times more than using a 5% deposit with Help to Buy. Okay. It's 3.5 times more than using a 10% deposit because you got Help to Buy, okay, or your first time buyer, okay? So these are just some of the things to think about. What does that mean? That means you might have to put down a larger deposit to start with, but you still are able to potentially live for free, or at least set up things the way that we've outlined, okay? So if you want to live for free, if you desire to live for free, but you're a family of 3 or more, and you're thinking, Samuel, well, how do I do that? This is one of the ways you can do that, by tapping into mixed use property or a residential property with a commercial element. That's one way. Now, let me go through a second way. A second way, okay? And this is just a way to think about it. It's not necessarily the ideal way. Depending on the location where you are, many people already have homes. You might already have a house that you're currently living, but your house might have certain space you're not taking advantage of effectively, okay? And I use the word effectively because everybody assumes they're taking advantage of everything they've got. But as I often say to my clients, take advantage of your advantages. Now, you might have an advantage in the form of a garage. You might have a garage connected to your house where you just leave your car in it. Now, what would happen if you invested £12,000 instead of buying a whole nother house, but just invested £12,000 in converting that garage into a ensuite bedroom, or converting that garage into a lounge, or converting that garage into a kind of WeWork space, okay? These are just, again, thinking outside of the box ideas. Now, after investing £12,000, probably less, in a garage to create a WeWork space, you can now advertise that in your local community and charge people a price for them to have maybe monthly access to that WeWork space, or for them to have daily access to that, there you go, thinking faster than I'm speaking, to have daily access to that WeWork space, and so forth and so forth. Now, if you decided to convert the garage into an ensuite bedroom, depending on the location, you could charge £1,000. You could charge more than £1,000 because most garages typically, or there are many garages that are larger than most double bedrooms, okay? So you could effectively have a large double with an ensuite open to be rented to someone, a lodger or someone else who might be paying you as much as £1,000 a month just to live in that garage. What is that? That is pushing you closer to living for free if you are part of a family of 3 or more. Okay, so that's the second idea with kind of a few sprinkles in there, third, fourth, fifth idea as well. So the key to this is, like I said, thinking outside of the box. If you're based in the US of A, one of the powerful things you guys have, which I spoke about in a few of the videos that I shared this week, is you can tap into the duplex, okay? The fact that you can buy 2 houses, but on the notary, on the paperwork, they look like you're buying 1. Or you can buy 2 houses, even though on paperwork they're separated as 2, but your transaction goes through as 1. Okay, so you can buy a duplex. In the UK, you can buy a house that's been split into flats. Now, here's the thing. If you buy a house that's split into flats illegally, it will take you more work to get that secured on paper, but that will be extremely valuable to you because when you go through the legalization process yourself, you will receive the increased value of legally splitting the house into flats. Okay, so there's an added bonus of value on that. Now, we don't have the time to go into that in this video. If that's something of interest to you, then let me know in the comments below. And if you're watching this and this is your first time meeting me, hello, good afternoon, good day, God bless you. My name is Samuel Akinwumi. I help people create consistent and colossal cash flow by using resources and revenues hidden in plain sight, okay? The way I do that is I literally spend all of my day finding key core principles, patterns, and principles from the Bible that I can then share with other people so their finances can have a revival. So if that is of value to you, you know what to do. Hit subscribe, hit like, hit share, show you care, and let someone else out there who needs this even more than you be able to grab this right here. So those are a few examples of how you can house hack and basically live for free, especially if you are part of a family of 3 or more. So if you're a wife who's tuned in and watching this right now and getting value, be sure to share this with your hubby. If you're a hubby who's watching this right now in the house, be sure to share this with your spouse. And if you're a child who's seeing this and saying, hold on a minute, how comes my mom and dad ain't being this? Then share this with your parents so you can take this value and elevate it in order to transform your finances to a whole nother level. Now, on the video I shared yesterday, which you can go and watch, I have broken down a whole bunch of value on concepts which are related to this, so feel free to go watch that video. But side by side with that, I want you to understand that if you leverage these concepts, if you leverage these principles, if you leverage these ideas, you are going to be giving yourself your best shot at your best life as it pertains to building wealth in terms of cash flow creation. With that being said, this is Samuel Akinwumi. I'm signing out. Good day. God bless. Let's go. And I look forward to your finances being able to grow as you remember small keys open up big doors. Let's go.